I was a stagehand at Travis Scott's festival, and what I saw that night, it wasn't just a performance. I watched him transform into something inhuman backstage, something that shouldn't exist. I'm not saying this for attention. I'm telling you because I can't keep this secret any longer. There's something dark, something evil, lurking behind the music, something nobody talks about. I don't know what it was, but I saw it with my own eyes, and I can never forget. I wish I could, but now, you need to hear what really happened. And it starts with the first time I saw him. I should have never stayed. If I had just turned around, walked away, maybe none of this would have happened. But I didn't. And now I'm stuck with the truth I've kept buried for too long. I never told anyone about what I saw at the festival. Not because I didn't want to. It's because I was too scared. Too scared to lose everything. Too scared of what people would think. Or worse, what would happen to me if I spoke out. But I can't keep quiet anymore. It's eating at me, and the longer I keep it in, the more I feel like it's gonna consume me. It all started like any other gig. I wasn't a fan of the guy. I wasn't even a fan of the music. I didn't get the hype. I was just a stagehand. A nobody in the grand scheme of things, working behind the scenes, making sure everything ran smoothly. But there's something about those big, high-energy festivals. There's an electricity in the air, a buzz you can feel even before the crowd starts chanting. And when it's someone as famous as him, someone who's at the top of the game, well, that buzz is everywhere. It's thick. It's suffocating. And that night, it was different. It wasn't the usual tension you get before a big show. It was more like a pressure in the air, something I couldn't explain, but I felt it as soon as I stepped onto the ground. The place was alive in a way I'd never experienced before. There were thousands of people screaming outside the gates, the music already pounding through the speakers, the lights flickering as they set up. But backstage, it was dead quiet. Too quiet. The crew was already moving at full speed, yet no one seemed to be saying anything. Everyone just had that look on their faces like they were walking on eggshells. And then there was the whispering. Crew members talking in hushed tones, sharing looks I couldn't place. There were rumors, I could tell. Things you didn't say out loud, but everyone knew. Stay out of certain areas after dark. Don't look Travis in the eye for too long. It was all said like it was some kind of joke, but I could see the fear in their eyes. That kind of fear doesn't lie. I figured it was just superstition, you know. Celebrities get weird reputations, and a lot of that's just part of the job. But there was something else. Something about that night felt wrong. The first time I actually saw him, Travis, I wasn't prepared. I thought I knew what to expect. He's a celebrity, right? He's used to being watched, followed, adored. But when he passed by me, it wasn't like I expected. He didn't walk through the crowd like a regular person. He moved through it like he was gliding, his presence overpowering everyone around him. He wasn't just part of the crowd. He was the center of it, pulling every eye, every thought, every breath toward him. It felt unnatural, but I didn't know that yet. Not fully. I remember his eyes. God, I remember his eyes. When they locked onto mine, it felt like they were drilling straight through me. Like they could see everything I'd ever done, everything I'd ever thought. There was nothing human about that gaze. It wasn't just a person looking at you. It was something else, something watching you from a place you didn't understand. And in that split second, I felt it. The first real chill running down my spine. But I told myself it was just me. I told myself I was imagining things. I had to. It couldn't be real. This was just a big show, right? Just another celebrity. But the more I watched him, the more I realized there was something different about him. Something off. He wasn't like the others. It wasn't just his charisma. It was his presence. There was something too intense about it. It was like he was controlling the space, bending it to his will, making it mold to fit whatever he wanted. And that's when it happened. I was walking through the backstage area, making sure everything was set for the show when I passed his trailer. I wasn't supposed to be there. No one really was, but something made me stop. Something I can't explain. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the growing feeling in my gut that something was off. I heard voices. His voice. And I figured they were rehearsing, getting ready for the show. But then I heard something else. It wasn't just his voice. It was wrong. It was like two voices overlapping. One of them was deep, unnaturally deep. It sounded like it was coming from inside him. I didn't know what to do, whether to keep walking or knock on the door, but my body froze. It felt like if I moved, if I did anything, I'd be caught in something I wasn't meant to see. I didn't knock. I didn't turn around. I just stayed there, listening. And then I saw it. Travis was standing near the back of the trailer, hunched over. His movements were wrong. His body wasn't moving like a normal person. So it was like he was stretching, like his skin was too tight for whatever was inside. I'm not kidding. It was like something underneath him was trying to break free. His skin rippled. I know that sounds crazy, but it's the only way I can describe it. It looked like something beneath his flesh was pushing to get out. And when he looked up at me, when our eyes met, I saw it. Those eyes, they were black, completely black. I swear to you, there was nothing but blackness in his eyes. It wasn't just the pupils, it was the whole thing. And in that moment, I knew I was seeing something that I wasn't supposed to. He just looked at me, and in a voice that wasn't even his, he said, "You shouldn't be here." And that was it. That was the moment I realized I wasn't at a concert. I wasn't at a festival. I was standing in the middle of something far darker than any of us could have ever imagined. I should have run. I should have left, but I didn't. I stayed. I couldn't move. And when I finally did turn away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just seeing a man perform. I was seeing something else, something I couldn't explain. I wish I could forget it, but I can't, because the worst part was still to come. And the worst part wasn't on stage. It was waiting backstage, just beyond where the crowd couldn't see. And what happened next? It's something I never thought I'd witness. Something that'll change how you see the world and how you see him. Stay with me. The worst is still ahead. The backstage area was exactly what I expected it to be. Busy, chaotic, and loud. People hustling to get last-minute things in order, the air thick with the hum of machinery, and the occasional burst of laughter or frustration. But there was something else there too. It was subtle. Something I couldn't quite place, but it was there. I walked through the entrance, past the large steel doors, into a space filled with equipment and wires scattered across the floor like someone had forgotten to clean up after the last show. The walls were lined with dimly lit corridors, their fluorescent lights buzzing quietly above. The smell of sweat, old coffee, and some faint, lingering scent of fresh paint filled the air. It wasn't unpleasant, just typical for a place like this. But it felt off. Like the whole thing was too polished, too well kept. I've been in backstage areas before, and usually there's some chaos, some mess. But here, everything was too precise, too perfect. It looked like it was all in order, but there was a coldness to it. The more I walked, the more the place started to feel like a maze. The walls seemed to close in a little bit with every turn. I knew this was the usual layout. Backstage is always a little disorienting, but something was different this time. The space felt empty, too empty. It wasn't just the lack of people. There was a silence that hung in the air, heavy and thick. You could hear every footstep echoing a little too loudly, every breath you took too sharp in the quiet. I stopped for a moment just outside a small room that had been set up for the crew. The door was slightly ajar, and for a brief second, I thought I saw something moving just inside. An unsettling flicker of shadow that didn't belong. I shook my head, dismissing it. The tension had been building all day. I'd been running around, checking equipment, making sure everything was ready for the big show, and my mind was probably playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I stepped inside the room, trying to push it all out of my mind. The fluorescent lights here were harsh, buzzing incessantly, and the hum of them made my teeth ache. A few of the crew members were seated around a table, scribbling down notes or sorting through cables. They didn't look up when I entered, their focus entirely on the work in front of them. A glance at the clock told me we still had a couple of hours before the show started. The normal pre-show rush. Yet, it felt like the waiting was already too long. There was no music, no excitement. Just a low murmur of voices and the sound of feet shuffling across the polished floors. I almost felt like I was intruding, like I didn't belong here, even though I was part of the team. I walked over to a workbench and picked up a piece of equipment, something to do with the lighting, and fiddled with it absently. But I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to the corridors I'd just walked through. The silence. It was like everything was too quiet. I could hear the buzzing of the lights above me, and it seemed to grow louder with each passing second until it was the only sound I could concentrate on. Even the muffled conversations around me felt distant. When I finally looked up, my gaze caught on a small detail in the corner of the room. A chair. A simple, empty chair, tucked into a dark corner of the room, away from everyone else. But something about it. It stood out. It was too clean, too neat. I didn't remember seeing it earlier when I walked in, and it seemed out of place, like it had been set there just for me to notice. I swallowed hard and turned my attention back to the equipment, my hands moving without thought as I checked the wires, making sure everything was connected properly. But my mind wasn't really on what I was doing. I kept feeling this pull toward the corner where that chair was, like it was waiting for something. Waiting for me, but I shook it off. I had a job to do. I couldn't afford to lose focus, not now, not when the show was just hours away. I moved past the chair, back toward the hallway, trying to breathe a little easier. The closer I got to the exit, the more I felt like I was stepping into a different world entirely. The air felt colder now. The temperature had dropped, but it wasn't from an open window or a door being left ajar. It was something else, something in the atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I stopped just inside the threshold of the hallway and looked around. The lights flickered slightly, and I heard a faint sound. A footstep, maybe? But there was no one around. No one else in sight. Then I saw it. Just at the end of the corridor, the door to Travis's dressing room stood slightly open, a sliver of darkness spilling out from inside. For a moment, I froze. The tension in my chest grew, tightening like a fist. I didn't want to go any closer, didn't want to look, but I couldn't move. I couldn't turn away. I stood there for what felt like a lifetime. And just when I thought I'd walk away, something shifted in the doorway. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a shadow. But it moved. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my legs wouldn't move. I felt glued to the spot. And then I heard something. Something so faint, I almost thought I imagined it. A whisper. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't Travis. It was deeper, thicker, like it was coming from within the room. I didn't even have time to process what it was before I heard the softest footstep behind me, too close. I spun around, but there was no one there. Nothing but silence, but it wasn't the silence from before. It was different now. Thick, suffocating. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched. The kind of silence that closes in on you until you can't breathe. And then I heard it again. Another whisper, but this time it was clearer. It was a voice I recognized, and it wasn't Travis. It was his. The feeling was suffocating. I couldn't explain it, but I wasn't alone anymore. And whatever I was about to walk into, whatever I was about to witness, it was only going to get worse. The atmosphere had changed. I couldn't quite explain it, but the closer I got to Travis's dressing room, the heavier the air felt. Everything that was once normal, chaotic but manageable, was now tinged with something darker. It wasn't just the silence that had settled in. It was something else, something unseen. It was like the space was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Or maybe it was just me, overthinking it. Maybe it was all just the tension before the show, but it didn't feel like that. I tried to shake off the feeling as I moved deeper into the area, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the otherwise still hallway. But as I rounded the corner toward the green room, I noticed a figure standing by one of the exit doors. A guest. He was dressed well, tailored suit, sunglasses indoors, and his presence alone made me feel small. He wasn't anyone I recognized. Maybe just someone on the guest list, some celebrity or business associate. But it wasn't the way he looked at me that unsettled me. It was the way he didn't look away. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second it felt like he could see right through me. No smile, no acknowledgement. Just this intense, penetrating stare that lingered a little too long. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly shifted my gaze, pretending like nothing was wrong. But that look, it stuck with me. It made my skin crawl. Like I was being sized up for something I didn't understand. I kept moving, trying to push it out of my mind, but the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it only grew as I reached the green room. I stopped in my tracks when I saw the door. It was just a regular door, nothing out of the ordinary, but it was locked. The room itself didn't seem special, just another area for the crew, but the lock, it wasn't like the others. I couldn't even explain why it stood out to me. It wasn't like the rest of the building. Everything else had been so sterile, so perfectly in place, but this door, I couldn't get it out of my mind. I glanced around, expecting to see someone walking by, but there was no one. It was just me and the door. I reached for the handle, but of course, it wouldn't budge. Something in me, some strange instinct, made me pull back. I didn't know what I expected to find behind that door, but part of me felt like I didn't want to know. I moved past it, but the door and that strange, foreboding lock stayed in my mind. The tension, the unease was building up inside me, and I could feel it crawling under my skin. It felt like everything around me was being drawn tighter, like the air itself was thickening. Then I saw it. Travis's personal assistant, or someone close to him, standing by the hallway. She was speaking with another staff member, her voice low and clipped. She didn't even notice me at first. When she did, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was too perfect, too rehearsed. The kind of smile someone gives when they're trying to convince you everything's fine, even though it clearly isn't. I greeted her, trying to be polite, but she didn't respond the way I expected. She didn't even look at me as she spoke. Her focus seemed distant, like she wasn't really there. "Everything's fine. We're all set for the show," she said, her tone too smooth, too controlled. She didn't blink, didn't even seem to notice how odd it was that she had barely moved her lips when she spoke. I walked past her, but that feeling, that suffocating feeling, just wouldn't leave. The walls were closing in on me. I could feel my breath getting shallow, like the air was too thick to take in. It wasn't the show itself. It wasn't the crowd or the sound system. It was something else, something that had crept in unnoticed. And now it was everywhere. Even the lights, which had been flickering ever since I arrived, seemed to dim a little too much every time I glanced at them. Like they were struggling to stay on. Like something in this place was draining the power. I kept walking, trying to shake the unease off, but it wasn't working. It felt like I was being pulled into the tension. The energy around me was shifting, and I couldn't keep up. Everything seemed perfectly normal on the surface, but underneath, there was something far darker brewing. Something that didn't belong in a place like this. As I moved deeper into the complex, I passed another staff member. He was standing still, his back to the wall, staring at his phone. His posture was rigid, like he was waiting for something. It was strange. He didn't acknowledge me, not even a nod. But his fingers were twitching, moving too fast across the screen, almost like he was typing a message. But it was too erratic, too jerky. I tried to ignore him, but my eyes kept darting back to him. He didn't even blink. It was like he was in some kind of trance. His body didn't move, but his hands worked at a feverish pace, like he was locked in some kind of repetitive mechanical motion. I stopped for a moment, unsure of what to do. But before I could say anything, he suddenly turned and walked away. His movements stiff and robotic, like he had been programmed to go somewhere. I watched him disappear into the next hallway, his footsteps too loud in the eerie silence. Something in me told me I didn't want to know where he was going. I tried to focus again on the task at hand. There was too much to do, too much to worry about. But the discomfort was growing. Every corner I turned, Every staff member I passed felt like another piece of the puzzle was falling into place, except the pieces didn't fit. The hallway seemed to stretch longer now, the silence amplifying with each step I took. I could feel something behind me, a presence just out of sight, like I wasn't alone anymore. It wasn't just the usual pre-show jitters. It was something else. Something is wrong. And then I saw Travis. He was standing just outside his dressing room, talking to someone I couldn't make out. He was surrounded by his entourage, but they seemed to move like they were on autopilot. Too stiff, too controlled. His eyes scanned the crowd as they spoke, but there was nothing human in that gaze. It was like he was observing something through a glass, like he was separate from everything around him. I tried to look away. I tried to keep going, but I couldn't. It was like I was drawn to him, like I needed to know what was going on behind that mask, but I didn't get the chance. Before I could take another step, one of his staff members waved me off with a sharp, "Not now." And just like that, I was forgotten. But something in me told me that what was happening behind those closed doors wasn't just a show. The door to Travis's dressing room closed behind me, but what was waiting inside was far more dangerous than I ever could have imagined. And the worst part? It wasn't just happening to him. It was happening to all of us. The moment it shifted, I felt it in my chest first. A tightening, like a fist had gripped my ribs and refused to let go. I'd been uneasy before, yes, but this was different. This was no longer imagination, no longer nerves about the show. Something was wrong, and I knew it. In a way that bypassed thought and went straight to instinct. My hands were clammy, my stomach a hollow pit, and I knew in that instant that whatever was happening backstage was not normal, not human, and definitely not safe. I had just turned a corner near one of the corridors leading to the private rooms. The lights flickered briefly, a common occurrence in these old backstage setups, but this time, it was accompanied by a hum that vibrated in the air, low and insistent, like a warning. I stopped, heart racing, and looked around. The hallway was empty. The other crew members had vanished, swallowed up by the maze of rooms and equipment. I should have felt relief, but instead, the emptiness pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. And then I saw it. A shadow, fleeting, brushing along the edge of my vision. I spun my head, but nothing was there. Nothing moved, nothing shifted. Yet, my instinct screamed that it had been more than a trick of the eye. Something had passed behind me, close enough that I could feel the air move against my skin. I stepped back, nearly tripping over a cable that wasn't there a second ago. My pulse pounded so hard I thought it might give me away, but no one was around to hear it. The silence was absolute, except for that low, vibrating hum that seemed to resonate with my chest, rattling the air around me. I tried to focus, tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe I was imagining things. But as I moved forward, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I realized I was holding my breath without knowing it. My eyes were scanning every shadow, every corner, every door. The locked room I had noticed before now seemed more ominous than ever, as if it were breathing, expanding subtly in the dim light. I couldn't tell why, but something about it was wrong. The lock glinted, but it seemed almost to pulse, like it was alive, like it was watching me the way that guest had earlier. That look, frozen in my memory, surged back with terrifying clarity. A silent warning I had ignored. Then came the first truly unexplainable moment. I was passing a row of equipment cases, neatly stacked, when one of them shifted. Just a fraction, barely noticeable. I froze. I bent down, thinking it might have been an uneven surface or a draft, but the floor was solid. No wind, no vibrations. My hands hovered above it, and then it moved again, sliding silently a few inches to the side. I jerked back, heart in my throat. I stared at it, disbelief and fear coiling tight in my stomach. The case hadn't been touched, and yet it moved. And then another one behind it slid slightly too, as if something unseen was arranging them. My rational mind screamed there was an explanation, but my instincts told me there wasn't. I swallowed hard, every instinct urging me to leave, but I couldn't. My feet moved forward against the weight of my terror. The corridor seemed longer now, stretched impossibly, the walls slightly crooked, though I knew they weren't. Shadows pooled at the edges of my vision, and the flickering lights now stuttered like heartbeats, casting them into sudden clarity, and then swallowing them again. My chest tightened further. I could feel sweat running down my back, prickling my spine. The air had grown cold, too cold, and every breath felt sharp and shallow, like inhaling shards of ice. I passed a staff member leaning against the wall. He didn't look up, didn't react to my presence, but his posture was wrong. Too rigid, like he was frozen mid-motion. And when he did move, it was in sudden jerks, like a marionette with its strings tugged too tightly. I should have been reassured that it was just someone, anyone, but it was worse. Seeing something human act so wrong, so mechanically, made me realize that I wasn't imagining the strangeness here. The place itself was wrong. Everything around me was wrong. Then I heard it. A soft sound, almost imperceptible, but it made the hair on my arms stand on end. It wasn't a footstep. It was more like a shifting, sliding sound, echoing from just around the corner. My eyes darted toward the source, and the hallway ahead seemed impossibly dark, deeper than it should have been. The light from the flickering bulbs barely reached the far wall. And then I felt it, a pressure behind me, a sensation of being watched, followed immediately by the unmistakable impression that something was moving with me, keeping pace. I didn't dare turn. I couldn't. It was too close, but when I stole a glance at the empty corridor behind me, nothing moved. Nothing should have. Yet I could feel it there. I tried to focus on the mundane again. Maybe I could convince myself it was just nerves. Maybe just exhaustion, maybe just imagination. But it was hopeless. The unease had grown into something tangible. The shadows weren't just shadows anymore. They were shapes, almost forming but never fully resolving. I passed a chair placed near a wall that hadn't been there before. A small, simple chair, but it seemed intentionally out of place, too far from many workstations. I glanced at it, my stomach tightening, and swore it shifted slightly when I wasn't looking, just enough to make me jerk back. I blinked, and it was still perfectly normal, but the impression remained. Something had moved, and I knew it. And then the unexplainable escalated. A faint whisper echoed from the end of the hallway. Not a word, not even a sound I recognized, but a low, vibrating hum in the back of my skull. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't part of the building systems. It felt alive. My pulse skyrocketed. My legs were trembling. I had no idea if anyone else could hear it, if it was just in my head, but I knew I wasn't imagining it. Something in this place was reacting to me. or perhaps waiting for me. The hairs on my neck bristled. My stomach was a knot, and I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. Every instinct I had screamed to leave, but my curiosity, or maybe my dread, kept my feet moving forward. I approached the corner leading to Travis's dressing area, my body tense, my ears straining. The lights overhead flickered again, and for the briefest instant, the shadowed doorway ahead seemed to shift, like it breathed. I froze, my eyes wide, and then it happened. Something small, almost imperceptible, but my stomach dropped. A hand, or maybe just the suggestion of one, seemed to appear briefly along the edge of the doorframe. I blinked, and it was gone. Nothing remained but the quiet hum, the flickering lights, the cold air pressing against my skin. I wanted to run. I wanted to bolt down the hall and escape, to leave the unease behind. But something drew me forward, something I couldn't explain. The locked door to Travis's private room loomed at the end of the hallway. Its presence was heavier now, more ominous. I couldn't see inside, but I could feel whatever was waiting behind it, waiting for me. Every sense in me screamed to retreat, to flee, but my body betrayed me. I was frozen in fascination and fear, trapped in that corridor where the air felt thick enough to choke me. The shadow of the room seemed to reach toward me, and I knew, with terrifying certainty, that whatever I was about to witness, whatever was lurking behind that door, was something I would never forget. The door didn't just hide a room. It hid a truth, one I wasn't prepared to see. And once it revealed itself, nothing would ever be the same. I knew something had changed, but I didn't know how much until I stepped into that room. It was like everything. The air, the floor beneath me, the walls around me, had shifted just enough to make me feel off balance, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite see but could feel pulling at me. The noise of the festival outside had faded, muffled into a distant, unnerving hum. It wasn't the quiet that scared me. It was the way the quiet seemed to reach out and press against my skin, like a hand I couldn't escape. I had walked into a dressing room. It should have been a normal moment, just another place where the crew did their work, where the artist would prepare before taking the stage. But the space, the room itself, had become something more. Everything in it felt wrong. I couldn't pinpoint why. The lighting was dim, but not in a comforting way. It cast strange shadows across the walls that didn't match the objects they were cast on. There was a vanity mirror, cracked along one edge, the glass reflecting something behind me that I couldn't quite see. I tried not to look at it too long, but my eyes kept darting back, unwillingly. Travis wasn't there at first. His assistant was, but she didn't seem normal. She was standing at the back of the room, head tilted down, her hands wringing a towel over and over. She didn't acknowledge my presence at all, her eyes fixated on something invisible in her hands. The room felt small, stifling, even though it should have been spacious. There was a strange tension, a thick air that made it feel like I wasn't supposed to be there, like something or someone was watching me. I didn't want to stay in that room for too long, but I had a job to do. I had to prepare, make sure everything was in place. As I began checking the lights, adjusting the cables on the floor, I noticed something. Something subtle, but enough to make my heart skip. The mirror across the room reflected me, but in that reflection, I could see something else. At first, it was so small, I almost convinced myself it was a trick of the light. But then, I saw it more clearly. Travis's shadow, elongated and fluid, twisting unnaturally, stretching toward the corner of the room as if trying to escape the bounds of the mirror. My body went cold, and my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't look away, though I didn't want to look at it. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I turned quickly, half expecting to see someone behind me. But there was nothing. The room was too still. I glanced back at the mirror, but the shadow was gone, replaced by my own reflection. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was wrong. Before I could reach for the door, I heard it. A soft whisper at first. Then it became clearer. A low, distorted voice, like it was coming from beneath the floorboards. It wasn't in my head. I felt it in my chest, vibrating in my bones. I froze. The room closed in on me. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead. The door seemed miles away. I turned slowly, looking around, but the assistant was still standing there, wringing the towel, her eyes never lifting. She hadn't noticed the shift in the air. She hadn't heard the voice. "Are you okay?" I managed to ask, my voice too loud in the silence. She didn't respond, just kept squeezing the towel in her hands. Then I heard it again, louder this time. The voice. His voice, Travis's voice. "Get out!" The words weren't clear, not normal. They didn't belong to the living. The tone felt wrong, as if they came from somewhere outside time, something dark. The ground beneath me tilted. I had to leave, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, locked in place by the suffocating fear. My heart raced in my chest, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. And then I saw it. A dark shape, stretching in the corner of the room. A figure, or maybe just a distortion. Something larger than life. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. I stepped back slowly, my feet dragging across the floor, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't look away. I felt it now. Something was coming for me, and that's when I saw him. Travis, standing in the doorway. But it wasn't him. His eyes were too wide, pupils black as coal, swallowing the light. His skin seemed too tight, too stretched. His body didn't fit him anymore. His lips pulled wide, revealing sharp, too many teeth. The air around him vibrated like the space itself was warping. I couldn't look away. I couldn't breathe. The voice came again, whispering, "No," commanding, "Get out!" And then, just like that, he was gone, vanishing into thin air. The silence left behind was deafening. I turned, hands shaking, and fled. But as I ran, I knew one thing for certain. It wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. I thought I was free, but the door was just the beginning. What I saw that night, it was only the start. What's waiting next? It's beyond anything I ever imagined. I didn't run at first. I froze. My legs turned to stone, my chest tight like something had locked me in place. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even think. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring into the space where Travis had been. No, it wasn't him anymore. I had seen something else, something not human. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. every heartbeat a reminder that I was still standing, but barely. The air felt different now, colder, thicker. It pressed against my skin, crawling down my spine like invisible fingers. The energy backstage, once buzzing, now felt hollow, like everything had been drained from the room. I could hear my own breathing, too loud in the silence, and my throat was dry. I don't know how I got to the door. My hands were shaking, fingers slipping on the handle as I yanked it open, desperate to escape. But stepping outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap to the face. It should have been a relief, but it made everything worse. It was like the fresh air couldn't touch me, couldn't clear the fear that had settled in my mind. I stumbled down the hallway, my feet dragging. Every instinct screamed at me to go faster, but my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. The terror had seeped into my bones, rooting me to the ground. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. I wanted to shout for help, but I didn't even know how to explain what I had just seen. The face, those eyes, that thing, the way it moved, the way it looked at me, like it knew, like it had seen everything in me that I tried to bury. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It was real, and it was happening. I kept walking, but the hallway seemed to stretch longer. Shadows in the corners seemed to grow, to follow me. I turned a corner and nearly ran straight into a staff member, but they didn't even seem to notice me, walking past with mechanical precision. Their eyes were vacant, distant, just like Travis, just like the assistant. "Are you okay?" A voice came from behind me. I turned around to see one of the crew members. He was standing a few feet away, smiling, but his expression was too soft, too blank to be genuine. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, like he was waiting for something. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. He nodded politely and walked away, like nothing was wrong. I should have been running. I should have been anywhere but here. But my feet wouldn't move. My heart was still thundering, every beat louder than the last. The world around me was quieter, colder. It wasn't right. I tried to focus, to think, but the panic kept flooding me in waves. I needed to get out. But every direction I turned, there was nothing but empty hallways, empty space. The deeper I went, the less like myself I felt. It was like I was lost in someone else's nightmare, someone else's mind. But it wasn't a dream. I stumbled through the maze of hallways, my thoughts spiraling faster than I could follow. What had I seen? I couldn't process it. My mind kept flashing back to that moment. Travis's face distorted. His eyes weren't just black. They were empty, like staring into an abyss that had no end. I had to find a way out. I had to leave, but every step felt like I was getting nowhere. The walls were closing in. I was hearing things now. Whispers, voices too close but just out of reach. The ground felt uneven, like I was walking on something that wasn't really there. And then I heard it. That sound, the same low hum, but now it wasn't just in the walls. It was in my head, louder, rattling my bones. The silence around me felt like it was suffocating, pressing down on me harder with each step. And then I saw it, him. But it wasn't Travis anymore. I didn't know what was real anymore, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But what I saw next, it wasn't just a man. It was something far worse. I wish I could say it was over, that I'd walked away from that place and left whatever happened behind. But I can't. I can't even tell you what I saw. Not truly. because part of me still doesn't believe it. And the other part, the part that can't shake the feeling of his eyes on me, the part that still hears that voice whispering from the shadows, tells me that whatever I thought I saw, whatever I thought I escaped, it's still out there, waiting. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I see him. Not in the way you think, not just his face, but a shadow. It's still with me, creeping into the corners of my vision, hiding in the dark spaces of my thoughts. And I wonder if I was ever meant to leave, if that door was ever meant to open, or if I'm just a part of something now, something I can never escape. What happened that night, it didn't end. It followed me, and I can't shake the feeling that it's still waiting.